Theme, everybody working together. Hi, everyone. Welcome today. Happy 4th of July week, and we have a very special guest. She is an aging life specialist. Her name is Carole Larkin. I want to give you welcome, Carole.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you just a little information. Carole, I have known her over the years in healthcare. When I met her and she introduced herself, she told me, "Joe, I'm the one that takes the keys away." I loved that. I'll never forget that. She has a heart and love for dementia patients. She helped me. Both of my parents were unfortunately walked that road with dementia and Alzheimer's, and Carole really helped me through. I want to just tell you a little bit of accolades on Carole. She trains caregivers in dementia care to enable our higher quality level of care for people with dementia. She's trained on mediation and works with elderly attorneys to resolve difficult family issues regarding dementia. She has been a dementia consultant for more than 12 years. She has got her master's in applied gerontology with a specialty in aging services from the University of North Texas. And welcome, Carole.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you. I'm pleased to have you. We're going to start right on a topic that you and I have both talked about just in the last week. The serial killer.
Yeah.
The gentleman who has killed now, they've figured out 16 people.
Correct.
16 seniors in senior independent communities. He went in, posed as a janitor.
Correct.
Or a maintenance worker.
Correct.
And went in and smothered these sweet little innocent victims and stole from them. The thing that is most upsetting to me on this, why did that not make national news?
Mm-hmm.
He is a serial killer. He was also not, he was an illegal. He had let his visa lapse. So how did this happen? And Carole, what are your thoughts on this? Just tell us your thoughts on all this.
Sure. One, of course, it's horrible, it's pitiful, it's unnecessary, all of those. This gentleman was able to talk his way into a community. Actually, it was several communities, but he did apparently his most damage in one community. I am guessing it was independent living as opposed to assisted living or memory care, and it was not a nursing home. Apparently, most of these people that he robbed and killed were on the 4th floor of this community, and apparently that 4th floor did not have any monitoring. The other floors did have monitoring, but that one didn't. That said, the monitoring in many communities actually happens in the public areas, in the hallways and some lobbies and things like that. These crimes occurred in the people's rooms. So the real issue is, one, him getting into the building, and two, people automatically opening the door and being so trusting. And unfortunately, in our elderly population, it's people are so trusting, when many times, they shouldn't be, whether it's killing them or robbing them or scamming them or that sort of thing. They come from an era where there was more honesty, less deception. And so it's a twofold problem, I think. One, yes, more security needs to happen, even in independent living. And two, maybe more education to those residents to actually be a little cynical and question people.
But, as we age, our memory worsens. And I could see a family saying, oh, wow, this is a beautiful place. I love the brochure. The people are smiling. And I always say, don't ever trust a brochure. A brochure does not mean you're getting adequate care. But one thing people don't understand, and it's confusing to me too, and I'm in healthcare, the independent living versus assisted living. So they move in for independent living in this wonderful community. So what does that give them? I mean, what does that mean? Are they just paying for an apartment and a meal? Or what are they actually paying for when they go to independent living?
Excellent question. Independent living straight up is being like in an apartment building and paying for a meal. That said, nowadays, because people do what they call aging in place in the older communities, the independent communities have added on extra services to help care for them. Now, those extra services do not include security. It's care for, what we call the activity of daily living, helping people eat, bathe, walk, that sort of thing. Security at the moment is up to the individual family.
And are they aware of that? Is that, I guess, when they're signing on the paperwork, they know what they're moving in. I mean, they have to spell it out. So I'm sure paperwork is going to be changed and consents for moving in, that they understand we are not a security company.
Right.
They're in independent living.
Right.
Right. And a lot of people, they don't want to think, nobody says, you know what, when I turn 85, Carole, will you find a great nursing home for me? They're not going to say that. Everybody wants to age in place.
Right.
And so it's a selling tool. Hey, move into our great independent living, and you've got activities. We go do this. We play bingo. We go to the casino. But they do need to ask these questions, even in independent living. And this is a lesson I've learned from that. Also, just because, and the community that where this took place, I know a lot of people that work there. They are stellar people in the community. They are knowledgeable and want the best. They don't say, I'm going to work there and just do a crummy job. They really do and have integrity with what they do. So it, unfortunately, it could have happened to any of us. Right. And I do know the benefit for seniors in this horrible incident is that they are making stricter. The hiring process has got to be stricter. For sure. Even with all this, we are private duty. We're not Medicare. We're not Medicaid. But we did get a call from the Dallas Police Department to make sure that this gentleman was not one of our employees. Sure. Because he was working under other names. And I think they called every home care, hospice, Medicare just to make sure, were there any other patients that were on home care?
Right.
Could have been a hospice patient, and they
Right.
would have thought, oh yeah, they passed.
Right. Right.
One thing, as a former hospice nurse, in the 25 years I've been a nurse, I can count on one hand people that just passed without being in that process, without having a type of dying process. It is very rare just to die in your sleep.
Right.
And you and I both know that. And so that should have been picked up immediately. Wow, you and I as healthcare professionals, we know that.
Right.
And that would just be very unusual.
Right. Right.
But I would, for the person that's listening today, if you are moving your loved one into an independent community, do you have cameras in the halls?
Right.
How do you know who's coming in? And
Right.
what if Uber Eats? What if Mrs. Smith loves to get Uber Eats at night?
Right.
So are you going to let the Uber Eats driver? How is that? How are you going to handle those kind of things?
Right. Agreed. And, as an additional layer, you may want to consider adding some monitoring within the apartment. The first thing that comes to mind is cameras, but there are other ways to monitor that people may not feel are quite as intrusive.
Like, for instance?
For instance, there are motion detectors that are placed in strategic places within the apartment. So if the motion detector is going off too often, that may be an indication that somebody else is in the apartment with them. When it's abnormal, it's not the pattern. So there are other ways through some technology. The problem is, of course, it's a privacy thing. But I guess the question always comes down to safety versus privacy. And privacy normally wins until the safety was needed. So I understand how difficult it is for families, but if they actually think about it, there are ways to quietly monitor so that the family could learn when something was abnormal in the pattern.
Well, and I have a brand new grandbaby, and he's adorable, but my daughter-in-law has a little monitor. And so if she's in the kitchen, she's got her monitor. If she's outside, she's got a monitor if the baby's sleeping. And I know those are relatively inexpensive now.
Right, that's true.
And just periodically checking, randomly checking.
Right.
In private duty, we have a good portion of our clients have cameras. They can afford it. We're private pay, so they can afford it. And I always recommend get the camera.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone on our staff, treat every client as if you're on camera.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's just an additional safety measure, accountability.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me, I know you brought some books.
Yeah.
We're going to switch on over to just talking about dementia and Alzheimer's. Tell me just some information, the latest information, or something you'd like to share that we can talk about.
Sure, absolutely. So the bottom line is most people who have not been exposed to these horrendous diseases think that the word dementia is a light-duty form of Alzheimer's, and that's absolutely not true. There are over 75 different dementias. For example, there's a dementia that happens in Parkinson's. There's a dementia that can come from alcohol abuse. There's a dementia that can come from a disease called Lewy body. It goes on and on. Oh, also, heart conditions, vascular conditions, things like that, traumatic brain injury. At any rate, there's lots of reasons why people can have a dementia. And the different dementias show different, I guess we'll call them symptoms. Sometimes you call them behaviors. But the bottom line on that is that this person is no longer able to think like the rest of us do. There's deficiencies. And so I call those people vulnerable and more vulnerable. And that's when they can be taken advantage of, and all sorts of unseemly things happen. And in truth, with the dementias, they're unfortunately terminal diseases. If there's no other reason that the person is going to die. That said, it's older people normally that get dementias, although occasionally younger people do. And people need more and more care because they're less and less able to care for themselves. When I go see my clients, my consultancy clients, I normally tell them to buy 3 books. They're little, they're skinny, and they're cheap. But these 3 books will give them information that is absolutely crucial to help them care for their families all along the journey. If I might?
I'd love that.
Okay. The first book is what I consider the most important book, and this book is not about the person with dementia at all. It's about the caregiver and the caregiver and how they think about the person with dementia. Basically, people's emotions, of course, get all wrapped up in the deficits and what they see as the loss. And then, after all, it's their parents or their spouse, and emotions can absolutely rule logic and reasoning. And this book actually helps people de-emotionalize themselves enough so that they can take better care of the person, the parent or the spouse. And this book is called Coping with Alzheimer's, A Caregiver's Emotional Survival Guide. And what this book does is break down all the things that caregivers go through, guilt, anger, denial, all sorts of things like that are actually inhibiting them from truly dealing with the person and the disease. This book also teaches them how to talk inside their heads, talk that anger and guilt and denial down so that it inhibits less
conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it makes life easier day to day. But if you can't wrap your head around the disease, you'll never be able to wrap your arms around the person with it. So you work on yourself first, and that's why I say this is the most important book. For people, most people, as you say, can't afford the concierge, I like to call us, the concierge services. And so I came across this memory care guidebook, and it actually comes from a nonprofit in St. Louis. And this nonprofit, called Memory Care Home Solutions, has very simple, very easy things within it that a person can do for their house, safety measures, things like labeling drawers as to what goes in them, labeling cabinets, this is for dishes, this is for glasses, that sort of thing, so that the person with dementia, at least in the earlier mid stages, can actually assist in household chores and have a purpose for their day. They're helping rather than being dependent.
Right. And everybody, my grandmother would say, who passed at 97, honey, you just want to always feel needed. She said, I want to still feel needed. I want to help.
Right.
And so when she lived with us, we'd have her put the salad together or set the table, and she loved that, being, even if she was in her wheelchair scooting around, but it gave her something to do. And it's so important to understand where they are. What's the other one? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great book. This book is actually specifically for men, because
Wow.
yes, because there's more women than men that get Alzheimer's or dementia, and these poor men who have never been caregivers, they were the breadwinners, have never done this, are faced with this ridiculously overwhelming task. As overwhelming as it is for women, double that for men, because if they've never done it. Mm-hmm. So this book is actually set up like a football coach, because it was written by a football coach. It was written by Coach Frank Broyles, who was a coach for many years for, I'm going to say this right, Alabama. Oh, it might be Arkansas. Oh, gosh.
That's okay.
Arkansas. And he was the caregiver for his wife, and is set up like a playbook for football. And granted, many men understand football. This book relates to them specifically, lays it out in terms that they get, and probably most importantly, it's short and to the point. Forgive me, guys, they don't like to read a lot. So
that's great. What awesome books. And can we get those on Amazon?
Yes,
Okay.
all of them. All of them are on Amazon,
That's awesome.
and they're cheap.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely pass those along. That's great. I'm going to buy those books too. You had some information. Can we talk about just one specific dementia? I'd love to talk about the alcohol related. That was what my dad suffered from, and my sister and I, both RNs, we detoxed our dad. we did a detox program with the doctor, did it at home, and started giving him non-alcoholic wine. He did not know the difference. It really did improve his quality of life. So talk to me about, what do you do about that client that was a big drinker that
Right.
has alcohol-related dementia?
Right.
How do you, Carole Larkin, as aging life specialist, if you were given this daunting task, family member was the pillar of the community, big drinker, it's alcohol related, he's having anger issues, family is in denial, he is the patriarch of the family.
Right.
Not just with alcohol, it's with other types of dementia, but I see this a lot, and nobody wants to redirect dad because he's the one that always called all the shots. He's the one that had the pocketbook, and
Right, right.
So how do you deal a family dealing with something like that? What would your suggestions be?
My first suggestion would be exactly what you did. Slowly, kindly, and with great stealth, detox dad. Yes. Starting with wine, but you can do it with beer or mixed drinks, doesn't matter. Slowly begin to water them down until they don't realize, and the disease itself, as it progresses, unfortunately or fortunately, makes people less aware of their circumstances and environment. Consequently, in relation to that, they're less and less able to discern that their psyche, their environment is altered. It actually works for the family, believe it or not, but it takes time to do that. Once the person is actually detoxed, and yes, you do see anger and frustration and all sorts of things, and that comes with the dementia. Two big problems. One, father was the ruler of the roost, and that's a pattern that has always existed, and in order to remedy the situation, that pattern has got to be adjusted to the father sharing the ruler of the roost position with the rest of the family. So one, yes, the family is scared to change the position that has always been, but for safety purposes, they know that he needs to be changed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the situation to begin with. So one of the things that is probably the most helpful in changing it is to ask the person's consent and appeal to their ego by asking their permission gently, quietly, and in a way that is, I'm going to call it a little stealthy, not too much. I call them therapeutic fibs. I do, therapeutic fibs. And that is to do two things. One, start using the word let's. L-E-T''S. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's go to the kitchen. Let's have lunch. Instead of saying you
Right.
or I.
Right. Dad, you can't have another glass of wine. Instead, say,
Let's have some soda, right now, and then we'll have another glass of wine later. And later is never defined.
Right.
And later may never come. Therapeutic fib. But let's clean our palate, Dad,
Yeah.
Cleanse our palate. And so when you use the word let's, it's an inclusive term which gives dignity and soothes the ego of the person. They're joining you rather than standing apart from you. So
and they're not losing control.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's great. Okay, another question. We just have time for one more. This has been so great, and I'm going to definitely have you back. This is my biggest, I get complaints from family members. The one adult child that handles everything. The other kids just put their head in the sand. what do you say to the family when it's obvious? And I see it all the time. One daughter, bless her heart, is dealing with her own family, dealing with her parents. And the siblings just won't help. And they're like, oh, she'll do it. She lives close by or whatever. What do you say to that family as a group, or how do you handle that?
That's an excellent question, and you're right. It happens all the time. Two things, two very basic and simple things. One, that daughter gets this book because this addresses it, and make sure that the others read it, has the others read it. Two, if they absolutely cannot and will not help after being educated, then really the best thing to happen is to have them give money so that that daughter gets the home care, health care, gets the relief that she needs to continue to shoulder the burden that they won't give up. It's much easier to give money, and I'm not talking about a lot of money. You know, if there's 4 others and they're giving, you know, $25 a week, I don't care. You know, anything to buy the lady time. That's not too much skin off their teeth.
Yeah, just let them go to lunch and a movie or something. You know, just give them a break. Well, Carole, we're out of time. This has been fabulous. Thank you for talking about the situation with the gentleman that all those deaths that's been going on. It's in the news. We want it to be in the national news, though, so that we can raise awareness for
Right.
what is going on, and we have to protect our seniors.
Right.
So thank you again. We will definitely have you back. Have a wonderful 4th of July, and keep on doing what you're doing. You are a leader in the industry, and we're grateful to have you in our Dallas community.
Oh, thank you, Joe. You're terrific. I love you.
Thanks.